Hello, everyone. Um, I'm so happy to be here introducing the 2020 North Carolina Artist Exhibition for the Raleigh Fine Arts Society. I had a whole little section about my history in North Carolina that I just crossed out because you so eloquently gave all the background of my history that brought me here, so thank you for that. I would just like to open following all of the gratitude that's already been said on this stage. To say that, yes, having worked on that previous North Carolina Artist Exhibition 22 years ago, I do have a sense of how difficult it is to coordinate one of these exhibitions. And I just want to say, first off, thank you to all the artists who submitted work for this show, both the people that I selected and that I didn't. It is only by having a robust group of risk-taking artists who are open to participating and submitting for a show like this that a curator like myself even has a job to do at all. I also want to thank the team at CAM for so elegantly installing the show and placing it in the beautiful gallery across the street. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank everyone at the Fine Arts Society who have extended such a warm welcome to me and made this entire process such a joy, including especially Jan Woodard, who did such an incredible amount of work and was on top of every detail through the entire process of this show, from inviting me and laying out all of the terms of what the show how it would work, and managing almost 1,600 submissions, right, that came in through the systems and everything, and who really managed every aspect of that process with sensitivity, care, a deep respect both for me and for all of the artists in the show. So thank you, Jan, and another round of applause for you. So with all that said, for the next hopefully 25 minutes or so, I just want to make a few remarks about my process in assembling this exhibition and the ideas that I hope it engages, and highlight just a fraction of the works that I've selected for the show, which you'll see along with all the rest across the street and the museum. When Jan invited me to serve as this year's juror, I was flattered, I was honored, but I also wanted to take a minute to think carefully about what it means to jury an exhibition like this in our current cultural climate. Historically, juried exhibitions, like the North Carolina Artist Exhibition, were based in notions of connoisseurship. That is, the idea that an individual possessing expertise in matters of style, technique, and form could come to a community from the outside and objectively judge the quality of artist work based purely on their impressions of one or just a few artworks. And this arrangement sets up a very particular set of power dynamics in which the juror, usually from the center of the art world, comes to a more regional area and brings a whole set of implicit biases or preconceived ideas about quality or meaning that might not be apparent to the artists who are applying for the show, nor even necessarily to the juror themselves. They might not realize their own biases, but which nonetheless play out through a process of selecting works into groups of either in the show or out, which implies that some works are better than others. Today, with so many of us in the world of art and culture at large thinking hard about issues of diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion, this tradition has started to feel a little antiquated and sort of basically modeled on a colonialist way of thinking that promotes systems of competition, of hierarchy, and of judgment that could unwittingly get in the way of the hard work of community building. Like many other cultural workers today, I've been struggling with these kinds of power dynamics in my work at the Guggenheim, and it was inevitable that I would carry that struggle with me when I came to this exhibition and started selecting works. It seems clear to me that we need to find new ways to think through how power flows through the art world, which is surely one of the least equitable economies in the world. Yet, in my view, refusing to work within existing structures, whether they are major museum institutions or juried exhibitions like this one, isn't the answer. Organizations like the Raleigh Fine Arts Society are doing vital work in the community, supporting artists on the ground through promotion, through sales, through other forms of engagement. And exhibitions like this can do so much to help bridge the gaps between different art scenes, different parts of the country or the world, and foster connections that, if done right, can be integral to the process of decentralizing the art world. So instead, what I think we need to do is find ways to critique these old structures from within, even as we participate in them, and acknowledge their complexity, thus paving the way to transform them. For me, in this show, that meant taking on the role of a juror in open acknowledgement of the power that it vests in me, and with as much transparency as possible about my selection process, which is why I'm saying all of this. It's not a perfect solution by any means, but I hope that it's at least a way of moving forward with a full awareness of the complex situation that we all find ourselves in today. And in this show, that move towards transparency meant specifically adopting a very clear point of view with my selection and deciding to tell a very particular, though I hope multifaceted, story with the works that are on display. The works that I've selected were picked not just on the basis of their formal excellence, but more so for the ways that they reflect on cultural power dynamics and the ways that those dynamics impact us as individuals. Perhaps more than in other recent or past North Carolina artist exhibitions, most of the works in the show are conceptually oriented, meaning that many of the artists are driven as much by ideas or preconceived plans as they are by things like intuition or formal concerns of color, mass, balance, gesture. I have to say that this theme that I brought to the work didn't just spring entirely out of my own mind. As I reviewed the over 1,500 works that were submitted, I found again and again artists who were responding to the continual sense of social crisis that we all find ourselves surrounded by every waking moment of the day. Many of the works seemed especially to focus on issues of mortality and of the daily struggle to simply sustainably exist. In my mind, the show started to coalesce around a phrase, the matter of life and death, which to me expresses some sense of the urgency that many of us feel today, but also how important it is to make and to engage with art, which is at its heart a way of organizing and understanding matter, not just physical matter, but also social matter as it surrounds us. So with this phrase in mind, I selected the works in the exhibition around several themes, which, while distinct, also have their own interconnections and overlaps. Unfortunately, I only have time today to highlight those through a handful of the works in the show, but I hope that my discussion will offer some insight into why I made the selection that I did and leave you with some clues as to understanding how the rest of the works that I don't talk about fit into the narrative of the exhibition. So, the first group that I'll talk about are works that explicitly examine social systems, confronting the power that bureaucratic institutions hold over our lives and the fact that such power is so often distributed inequitably, and even unearthing historical moments of violence that lie in the shadows of these institutions. For instance, this piece by Joel Dietrich analyzes the functions of global commodity markets and the role of hidden economic structures in the foundations of cultural institutions, in this case, my home base of the Guggenheim Museum, which you see on the right side of the work, but does so through a form of diagrammatic abstraction that relates as much to modernist painting as it does to the aesthetics of video games, in this case, Tetris. Joy Drury-Cox creates drawings that also seem at first to be abstract, but in fact are hand-drawn replicas of government forms at one-to-one scale with all the text removed, exposing the underlying structure of how information is organized on these documents, these fragments of paperwork that are at once incredibly banal and yet have such a powerful presence in determining our lives. Fueled by the current political climate and ethnographic research, Stacy Kirby's performative installations address issues of identity, citizenship, and civil rights through the absurdist yet poignant restaging of bureaucracy. For this show, Stacy is presenting a new work called The Death Department that explores cultural and societal approaches to dealing with death as a moment of transformation. The flip side, Lee Walton's work takes on a 20-year ongoing performance that consists of weekly strategic actions for staying alive, pointedly and humorously staged for the purpose of outliving his life insurance and documented in this quasi-scientific format. If these artists investigate the procedural, systematic aspects of the social order, a number of others more explicitly focus on the emotional and physical impacts these kinds of systems can have on individual lives in real time and space. This thread ranges from these photographs by Chloe Rager, who uses drone photography to document what are called desire lines, these impromptu channels that are worn down by pedestrians who quietly refuse to follow the paths laid out by them for official city planners. Or we have this sculptural installation by One Gutierrez, which amasses a pile of painted stuffed animals as an homage to the children separated from their parents and held in captivity by government agents along the southern border of the United States. In Waits, Cheryl Rowland reflects on his experience of being wrongfully incarcerated for nearly a year of his life. This sculpture consists again of paperwork, but relates to the ad hoc waits that he and other inmates made using court dockets that they had printed at a detention center's law library in order to study for their trials and, in his case, exoneration procedures. For this work, the artist recreated those waits using papers drawn from the cases of other wrongfully convicted North Carolinians, which gives the work's title a double meaning, asking both who among us bears the weight of the American justice system and its over-reliance on mass incarceration, but also how the psychological weight of the traumas enacted by that system play out. Looking more historically, Anne Silverman addresses matters of similar emotional and historical weight by gathering fragments of handmade paper and tatted lace embedded with personal narratives that are drawn from the journals of her South Carolina grandmother and the slave narratives recorded by the Federal Writers Project in the late 1930s. Her work calls attention to the complex legacies of racial violence in South Carolina and the South more widely, politically evoking the ways that we continue to experience that history embedded in the social fabric of our country. Edward Baxter, too, looks at the history of slavery, but through another lens, imagining the daily life of enslaved people who appear like dark wraiths amidst fields of bright and colorful paint. Titled "Pick a Bale of Cotton, Pick a Bale a Day," this painting specifically addresses the role of enforced human labor in shaping the land, setting up not just a conceptual, but a material and formal means of envisioning the past. And this leads into another group of works that take up this idea of material history more explicitly with a special attention to the land and its relationship to human experience. Johannes Barfeld directly engages the bonds between land and body with this performance video, in which the artist and his collaborator Stephanie Woods, who is also featured in the exhibition, cake each other's bodies with red clay soil gathered near Winston-Salem. The piece establishes a mood that hovers in this really interesting way between a surreal ritual of self-care and a more ominous sense of oppression. Taking the interest in the land in a completely different direction is Donald Martini, who literally, again, engages with the earth in this painting construction, which incorporates soil harvested from places of personal significance to the artist as a pigment in a large-scale gestural abstraction that does not depict the landscape so much as become the landscape itself and transfer the landscape literally onto the gallery wall. As we think through these ideas of past, present, and future bonds between humanity and the earth, we can't ignore the significance of our own impact on the environment and the ways that human waste in all its forms is transforming the world. Artists like Deborah Kruger make their artworks by appropriating and incorporating rubbish and refuse as a material. In this case, conflagration is made from recycled plastic bags, printed with images of endangered birds, as well as phrases from threatened indigenous languages, which are then cut up and sewn into the shape of a region of Mexico where numerous bird species are endangered due to deforestation. Also, through the title and the shape, the piece brings to mind the widespread fires that we've been seeing both in Brazil of directly man-made causes, and in Australia of less directly, but still man-made causes. Nora Hartlaub's, The Insurmountable Thing, is a video documenting a performance on Jockey's Ridge in Nag's Head, in which a group of performers dressed in funereal garb witnessed the processional rolling of a gigantic ball of blue plastic through the sandy dunes. This ritualistic gesture, together with the work's title, serves as a metaphor for the Sisyphean weight of climate change denial and the impending loss of some of our most beautiful landscapes. In Sorry Mom, Laws of the Landfill, Laura Little similarly looks to mythic rituals through the accumulation of human waste. In this case, a remarkable list of materials are incorporated into this piece that I only have, I have none of included on the slide, so I can read to you that it includes things like shredded mail, broken glass bottles, a chair leg, bubblegum wrappers, hair extensions, joint compound, a Sharpie, an American flag, and, quote, every commandment the artist can remember breaking. Assembled into an impromptu religious totem, these found objects playfully interrogate our collective desire for myth and faith, especially in light of our cultural fascination with apocalypse and its aftermath. Andrea Vail also creates sculptural installations through a process of collecting detritus, but she incorporates an element of participation by staging workshops in which volunteers can donate objects to her projects and then working together with her collaborators in the application of sewn textiles, ultimately leading to the creation of complex, carefully balanced structures that reflect on the tensions between mass consumption and craft traditions. By using trash and discarded items as their medium, these artists may be commenting on waste and the kinds of overproduction that are endemic to American society, but their works are also opening onto a more psychological investigation. And we can see how the act of combining all these little bits of stuff into a unified whole might be a model for our own sense of self, which is built up from a variety of influences and experiences and is always at the risk of collapse or dissolution. This seems to be what Sarah Elizabeth Cornejo has in mind with her work, Lucille, which she describes as an exploration into hybridity and its potential to disturb the boundaries between fixed identity categories of race, gender, and species. A similar kind of psychic hybridity plays out in the several collage works in the show, including Melinda Fine's Aphasia, which is pieced together from fragments of bodies and birds to form a graceful and eloquent composition that depicts, in the artist's words, the inter- and intra-psychic forces that act within and between people. In her work, What Remains, Alia El-Bermani approaches yet another moment of trauma, in this case the death of her mother, expressing the power of grief by depicting a pensive female figure encased by a snake's skeleton against a nautical map that bears both personal significance and alludes to uncharted territories of emotion. Jennifer Markowitz, too, turns to cartography as a means of plotting out life experiences by embroidering her memories onto a repurposed nylon slip, an object that conveys a sense of intimacy and speaks to the absence of the body, especially as it is used to outline past encounters, moments of confusion, and other markers of the artist's life with bipolar disorder. This focus on the body and its relationship to materials like fabric, paper, ash, or ice comes up in several works in the show that are not so explicitly referencing the body, as a means of invoking memory and exploring processes of disappearance. This includes the work of Joyce Watkins King, who incorporates fabric garments, in this case the printing of an impression of a blouse, in order to mark the importance of tradition in the face of growing trends towards fast consumption and disposable culture. Sorry, my mouth is getting dry. Or Erin Kennedy, who captures the nearly invisible traces of dirt on old fabric through a self-made bleach transfer process. Molly Sawyer infuses icicles with pigment and allows them to melt on paper, opening her practice up to the chaotic forces of nature while also subtly reflecting on environmental change. And Allison Coleman stages her own disappearance as a way of exploring themes of body image, self-worth, shame, beauty, and ideals of femininity. Coleman's work opens up a final thread that I saw going through the submissions to this year's exhibition. After all these works that analyze the various ways that we are caught up in complex power dynamics of society and how those systems are transforming our environment and ourselves in both subtle and overt ways, there's a group of artists who choose to represent a bold resistance to those trends through portraiture, depicting subjects who stand proud in the face of adversity and claim space for themselves, and for others whose voices may not always be given equal space. These works privilege moments of contemplation, calmness, dignity, and even quiet confrontation. Often they take the form of paintings like this piece by Clarence Hayward, in which flat planes of paint set off the realistic presentation of a young brown girl's body, highlighting the mix of restraint and resistance that defines her as an individual. Other subjects may be fictional allegories for spiritual or emotional states, as in this painting by Ben Hamburger, or they may be real figures captured in the intimacy of their everyday lives, referencing, in the words of Natalie Straight, whose work you see here, how identity, bodily presentation, and physical surroundings build upon and influence each other. I'm going to end my talk with this painting by Sabotage, which expresses so many of the themes that run through this show. It's a tender portrayal of a queer Muslim woman, half rendered as a form floating in space among pink orchids and silver glitter, in a way that masterfully fuses social consciousness with an unabashed attention to beauty, resulting in a deeply emotional presentation of not just an individual, but a community and a worldview. For all their different viewpoints and approaches, every artist in this exhibition is, I think, trying to do something along the lines of what Saba is doing here. Through all the various themes that I've discussed, the works in this show are unified in their desire to bring moments of grace, beauty, and thoughtfulness into the world. They celebrate the core of what it means to be human, creating connections despite differences, fostering joy in times of pain, and extolling the glorious complexities of life itself. After all, it is through art that we can find a respite from the world's troubles, a moment of calm amidst the endless stream of crises that surround us, and a chance to gain critical perspective on our problems and an opportunity to collectively imagine new solutions. I hope that this exhibition can help foster a space for empathy, reflection, and conversation despite whatever differences we might hold. And I would like to thank you all for your attention, participation, and engagement. Thank you.